We've talked about police brutality as a whole, but now I think it's really important to focus on what's happening here on campus. What were the responses to the non-indictments on campus? What were the protests like?
I don't think a lot of people thought of it as protest, as more so as like a reaction, you
Okay.
know, because like that hit home hard for a lot of people, like and the scope of which they happened, like the non-indictment of Darren Wilson and Tamir Rice's death, and then Eric Garner's Officer Pantaleo's
Right.
non-indictment. And so I think it was more of the feeling from people like we have to do something to let people know that like we don't condone this, like we
Right.
don't stand for this, like this is not right.
Exactly.
Also, the fact that it wasn't just like a reaction thing as well, like because I was a part of a walk-in protest where we walked in classrooms and silently held signs that gave information on police brutality. So I feel like that's important to state because it's not something like we just were like something that just happened. Like this was at the beginning of the year before the non-indictments even happened, and I feel like people need to realize that it's definitely a system that's happening and not just like we're getting mad after something happens. Like people have been proactively fighting it.
Has there been any sort of backlash to these types of protests?
I say the biggest backlash has just been like the campus communities, cause like on by Porter's the little signs that people get to spray paint.
Right.
A lot of people like when we write like Black Lives Matter, they'll come by and put All Lives Matter. Someone will put Brown Lives Matter, Yellow Lives Matter. I'm not saying like the point of like the Black Lives Matter thing is that like it's a response to the police brutality thing that Black lives do not matter. And it's not a response to say that other lives don't matter.
Right.
It's just the fact that this is a systemic thing that has been happening to Black people.
Saying all lives matter kind of implies that there is no, like Andre was saying, that it's not that everyone is equal, right? That there is no like prejudice when it comes to police brutality, or it's not disproportionately affecting
Definitely.
those people in color, especially Black people. And like you just look at any numbers and tell you that's not the case.
People have been saying a lot, like, why La Jolla? We live in this very like affluent neighborhood, and it's so far from Ferguson. But it's like, why would we protest here?
I think it directly hits to that power dynamic, right? La Jolla is around 86% white. The average prices of homes are around $2 million. So when directly facing these traumas as people of color or Black folks in La Jolla as UCSD students, we are directly confronting the environment within which the UCSD as a campus was built, right? So what does it mean then that folks of color cannot access UCSD as a campus if you live in San Diego?
Exactly.
So we're directly saying to the space and to the environment, no, these systems of oppressions are here, and we are telling you that you are a part of it as a space. So hitting the space where it hurts, right? La Jolla,
exactly.
It needs to feel that hurt, you know.
Definitely.
I think it's a contradiction from society to kind of ask that question, why in La Jolla? Because the question or the critique always on the Black community is, why not, where's the unity amongst Black people, where's the unity, where's the common cause? And you see the common cause in things like this, where you say, I can look at the people in Ferguson and say, hey, my skin color is not different from theirs.
Exactly.
The same thing can happen to me that happened to them down there. And you say, I'm going to show solidarity for my brothers that are down in Ferguson and the things that are happening there, not just in Ferguson, because we recognize this is not an isolated incident, but all across the nation. And so I think it's kind of contradictory of society to say, oh, well, there needs to be unified front from Black people on these types of issues, but yet when solidarity does happen, it's, oh, these things aren't happening in communities like La Jolla. Why protest here?
So we have all these systems that are also supported by UCSD and by the UC system. We have Jenna Napolitano, the Porter-in-Chief, right, as our leader, as UC, right? So we have all these systems in place right here, and we're living in it.
Exactly.
So we definitely know what it feels like to experience those systems of oppression. So we definitely need to be the ones at the forefront in this region, right, to say, no, Black Lives Matter.
We have a video of one of the better known protests that we would like to show you guys and just see what your thoughts are about it. So
I gotta go to Ross right now, homie. If I don't get there, I'm gonna get fired. I got 6 kids to feed, and these niggas Carlos. Day goes on, homie. He's out every day. Deal with it the right way. Not like this.
This was the scene this morning. Thousands of irate commuters at a standstill, some getting out of their cars and taking matters into their own hands. One of the many angry drivers trying to get to work this morning was Tyree Landrum. In a moment that ended up going viral this morning, he got out of his car and pushed one of the protesters towards the center divider, wrestling his bullhorn away. The protesters were chanting, "No justice, no peace." Landrum wanted to send his own message. Many drivers felt the same sentiment, that the main injustice here was preventing them from getting to work in the middle of morning rush hour.
You guys don't have to go to work. They don't really know anything about the real issue, you know? They're just complaining about something that could be dealt with differently.
Meanwhile, many healthcare workers out of their cars and in their scrubs trying to get to area hospitals.
We have doctors and nurses who have the same life here, okay?
The drivers on scene rejoiced when the CHP and STPD showed up in force.
Spend the night in jail. That's where you guys are going to jail tonight.
Well, of course, that prediction ended up being untrue, prompting a slew of angry calls this morning. I'm Natasha Zuvest, Virginia. Back to you.
So what are your guys' thoughts on that video?
You know, I understand where he was coming from a place of a father trying to provide for his kids. But one of the big things is that, we are out there, or the protest is for him. You know, the protest is for people like him. It's for his kids, because going to work every day and going, you know, whether it be Ross or whatever job you go to, that doesn't protect your kids from death. And so if you go, you know, and get a paycheck and you have to use that paycheck to bury your child, I think 10 times out of 10 people would return the paycheck for the life of their loved one.
You know, the freeway as a space of protest is very strategic. You know, freeways here in California, the 5 was built to connect the missions from San Diego mission to San Francisco mission. So it's a product of a colonial era, and it's also a process of capitalism. So cutting that flow cuts the oxygen for capitalism.
Yep.
So it hit everyone where it hurts the most, which is money, right, and production.
Definitely.
And I think it was very strategic and very smart for the organizers to cut that, to say that these lives not mattering will cut the system of capitalist production and exploitation that happens.
Our purpose that day had nothing to do with violence. It had nothing to do with, just getting into, confrontation. The whole point was to make a strategic block to show people, to make people pay attention to what was going on, to hit America where it will feel the brunt of it, which is, in a capitalist country, is in its pockets. There's a subliminal equality going on here. You heard the reporter say that drivers feel that the real injustice is that they can't get to a day of work.
Right.
And so there's a subliminal equality here that, a black man's life, or, a black person's life is equivalent to a day of work. Here, that's the real injustice that's going on here, is that these people can't just continue their daily lives as if nothing happened.
Right.
And so that's where you're getting to the real meat of the Black Lives Matter movement. It's the fact that when these sorts of things happen, the tendency of the American public is to pretend like there isn't any racism, to keep up the facade of we've moved past this racist thing to a post-racial society. And I think things like, the freeway protests is not just here, but, across the nation that happen, really force people to stop and think about the issue. Because if you have to call in late to work, if you have to tell your boss what's going on, if there are news stations, if you can't go anywhere, it forces everyone to talk about the issue.
People need to be able to see that this is important, and it's important to if other lives are at stake, if my life is at stake, everybody's life, it matters to everybody. And I feel like that's why people were so upset that other lives were starting to be in place. Then it's an issue. Then people are upset when other lives are at risk.
Right.
But when Black lives are at risk, it's not so much of a outrage.
So do you guys have any final thoughts or experiences that you guys would like to talk about?
My final thoughts, I guess, is just like on the dude talking is kind of like he's a symbol for people to use, like, oh, even Black people don't like it. And then the fact that he said, you know, people die every day and this isn't the right way to do it, it's kind of like, what is the right way to do it?
Exactly.
Know? And he's going to, you know, basically saying that lives are insignificant because he has to continue his life, and that kind of goes into how this country is forcing people of color to forget about their race, forget about what matters to humanity, and just focus on survival. Because this man right here is focused on survival. He doesn't have time to think about, like, you know, police brutality and how, like, every 28 hours somebody is, like, getting killed by police because he's trying to survive. And I feel like that's a greater issue of this country, is that, like, you know, people have these negative stereotypes of Black men and Black people in general, and a lot of those things are fostered because people are trying to survive. It's not out of just blatant ignorance. It's because when you are forced to survive, there's certain things that you don't get to think about on an everyday basis.
Exactly.
My final thought is that when you look at, like, things like police brutality, and you talk about, like, accountability measures,
Right.
Like, there's a reason why people are distrustful of the system. Is because police often work with DAs and stuff. They establish relationships, they establish friendships, and it seems that protocol is always the case until it needs to be protocol.
Definitely.
Especially when you're looking at Ferguson and the discrepancies and how the grand jury was instructed, and just a whole bunch of other stuff. So, you know, really there needs to be, what tends to happen in these issues is, and, you know, one person said, and I don't remember who exactly, that Black people are usually on the forefront for a change for Americans in general. You know, the issues disproportionately affect us, but when you start to realize that, you know, police brutality is not a singular Black thing, it disproportionately affects Black people, but by solving the issue, then you solve the issue for all other races, and you create an infrastructure that makes police accountable, period. I think that's when America will start to wake up and realize, okay, these are things we need to tackle, not just because it disproportionately affects Black people, but because it is wrong, period.
Right.
Like, it is just wrong from a moral standpoint.
Yeah.
I definitely agree with you that Black Lives Matter is a transnational movement, and we have to look at it that way and see how it affects the, you know, different bodies and different localities all over the world, and see it as that forefront of change.